Hello everybody, welcome to Movies by McManus, the channel where we talk about movies, comics, TV, books, whatever type of media you're into, in the context of who created it and what effect it's trying to have on the world. I'm your host, Greg, and this week we're going to be talking about the comic book series Saga, written by Brian K Vaughan. This series ran from 2012 to 2018 and is currently on hiatus. The last issue ends on a pretty big cliffhanger, and while I normally don't care about spoilers too much on this channel, I'm not going to get into it. The story follows Alana and Marko, two soldiers from opposite sides of a war that seems to have been going on forever, with no end in sight. In an almost Romeo and Juliet in space way, the two meet and fall in love. When the two have a daughter together, they find themselves being hunted down by mercenaries from both sides of the conflict, both of which seeing them as traitors to their own planets. The rest of the series follows Marko, Alana, and their daughter as they're on the run from assassins and cosmic threats, and running into different characters whose lives are also at jeopardy for choosing peace over war. Now, when I read Saga, I couldn't help but think about the war in the Middle East. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but there are some notable similarities. Alana's planet of Landfall is one of the most technologically advanced planets in the galaxy, and Marko's planet of Wreath is home to a magic-wielding race of people that could be considered as religious fanatics, or at least just have a very conservative and traditional culture. This actually would not be the first time that Brian K Vaughan has brought up the war in the Middle East. His first novel is called Pride of Baghdad, about a pride of lions who escape from a Baghdad zoo and try to survive trekking across the war-torn country. So we have some similarities between these two stories. A small group just trying to have a normal life in a world that's at war. And what's very clear in the Saga is that it's the normal people who suffer the most in war. There's a strange truce between the two planets in Saga that no fighting will take place on the home planets themselves, but instead the entire war is delegated amongst their colonies. And even the planets that haven't been colonized are forced to choose a side in the war to fight on, or be declared an enemy of both sides, creating an inescapable situation for the entire galaxy. Like in any real war, the majority of the casualties are not the soldiers on either side, but the civilians who have gotten in the way. And in Saga, this creates hatred for both factions. In one of the later story arcs of the series, the protagonists are kidnapped by a group called the Last Revolution, a combination of soldiers from colonies on either side, who realize that it's Wreath and Landfall who are in fact their common enemy. Across the galaxy, the Last Revolution are hated even more than either side of the war. They are called terrorists, despite the fact that they're the only ones who are actively trying to find peace. It goes to show you the backwards logic of wartime thinking, where the idea of wanting to destroy your enemy is so ingrained into a society that those who would want to find peace are met with just as much, if not more, hatred than the enemy themselves. To make this even more ironic is that the Last Revolution are actually right in saying that it's Wreath and Landfall that's the galaxy's common enemy. It's hinted at the beginning of the story and then later confirmed that the two planets are actually working together to try to make the war last as long as possible. And their main goal for wanting to kill Alana, Marko, and their baby is because both sides are afraid that if the people find out peace is an option, then the war will end. It's never directly stated in the series why the two planets want to keep the war going, but if we can pull from real-world context, we can safely assume that this is for profit. To tie this back into the Iraq War, it does seem like our current situation in the Middle East is becoming a forever war, And the brutally honest truth of the matter is, the reason we won't find peace in the near future is because there are too many people who are profiting off the war. When military companies are given almost $2 billion a day to supply our troops, they are going to do everything in their power to make sure that peace never happens. And in a world where a corporation can donate unlimited amounts of money to political campaigns, once a ball like that is set in motion, it's almost impossible to stop. And in the end, those who suffer the most are the ones at the bottom. In Saga, along as in the real world, it's the galaxy's poor who suffer the most from the conflict, while the wealthy on Wreath and Landfall get to sit everything out. One of the villains of the story is a man named Dengo, a janitor for the royal family from a planet called the Robot Kingdom, which is one of Landfall's wealthier colonies. When there is a pandemic outbreak in the Robot Kingdom, Dengo and his family, being from the lowest economic class, fall victim, leading to the painful death of Dengo's son. It is mentioned that the disease is actually very treatable, but the royals let the outbreak spread because they are too preoccupied with their war and their profits. This leads to Dengo killing the robot princess and kidnapping her baby, later joining the last revolution in kidnapping our protagonists and trying to use them to end the war. It's hard not to sympathize for Dengo, especially living in America, a country that spends more on its military than the next 10 countries combined, and who will defund any and all public services in the name of budget cuts, while increasing the military's spending at the same time. And if it feels like Saga is an exaggeration to our real life, it should be noted that recently, the Pentagon took $1 billion in funds that was meant for medical equipment to help fight coronavirus, and instead used it on jet engine parts and body armor. So when talking about Saga, it's important to realize that this is one aspect of a very long series that covers several story arcs. It also tackles issues like abortion, religious fanaticism, drug abuse, and several others. And at its core, Saga is really about a family trying to stick together under the harshest of circumstances. But it's impossible to deny that this series is clearly critical of the military-industrial complex that exists in America. One major takeaway I think everyone should have from Saga is this: governments lie, especially when it comes to war. Ulterior motives are almost always at play, and that ulterior motive, 9 times out of 10, is money. But like I said, this is a long series and it covers a lot of topics. So if you have any thoughts or feelings about Saga, leave a comment below. And if you like this video, subscribe to our channel, check out our podcast, and follow us on social media at Movies by McManus. I'm your host, Greg. Have a good night.